It is Thursday morning in Beijing, and President Donald Trump welcomed by Chinese President Xi Jinping. We can see them earlier tonight shaking hands there at the Great Hall of People as this high-stakes summit.
You just watched how Trump flew into Beijing with a $1 trillion shadow cabinet and walked away with a headline deal. Boeing jets, soybeans, handshakes in a manicured garden. But here is the question nobody in the mainstream media is asking. What did Xi Jinping actually walk away with? Because while Trump was celebrating the deal on the flight home, Beijing's strategists were already executing the next move. If you want to understand how the real winner of the Beijing summit is quietly reshaping global power in real time, hit subscribe right now. Because what we uncovered in the days after the summit is something most analysts are still refusing to say out loud. In the 72 hours after Trump departed Beijing, 3 things happened that almost nobody covered. And each one tells you exactly what China extracted from that room. First, within 36 hours of the summit, China repositioned 3 naval carrier groups in the South China Sea. Not toward Taiwan, toward the Strait of Malacca, the single choke point that controls over 80% of Asia's oil supply. No statement, no press release, just a quiet, surgical move. Second, China's trade minister quietly reached out to the European Union offering preferential semiconductor access in exchange for a joint framework that effectively sidelines American tech export controls. The deal Trump thought he was blocking. China just rerouted around it entirely. And third, and this is the one that should terrify every American watching this, China's state media announced an accelerated timeline for its domestic AI chip manufacturing program. A program that, if successful, would make NVIDIA's export restrictions completely irrelevant within 18 months. Trump negotiated for trade headlines. Xi negotiated for strategic positioning. And those are 2 completely different games being played on the same board. Now let's talk about the CEOs, because their presence in Beijing was not a triumph. It was a confession. A confession that America's most powerful companies are so deeply embedded in China that their own billionaire owners had to personally fly to Beijing just to protect their supply chains. Think about what that means. Apple manufactures over 90% of its products inside China. NVIDIA was generating nearly a quarter of its revenue from Chinese customers before the export controls hit. Larry Fink's BlackRock has billions parked inside Chinese financial instruments. These men did not fly to Beijing as conquerors, they flew as hostages negotiating their own release. And Xi Jinping knew it. He did not grant this meeting because he needed Trump. He granted it because having the architects of America's digital economy sitting at his table on Chinese soil was the single most powerful signal he could send to every nation watching. Even America's tech elite come to Beijing when Beijing calls. Watch the body language carefully. These men walked into that room as billionaires. They sat at that table as supplicants. And they walked out having made verbal commitments to Chinese business partnerships that their own shareholders don't even fully know about yet. But here is where it gets truly dangerous. Because you've heard about the Boeing jets, you've heard about the soybeans. What you have not heard, what the official readouts carefully avoided, is what China demanded in exchange for all of it. 3 concessions. Each one buried so deep in diplomatic language that the average person will never find them. But geopolitical analysts from Singapore to Berlin are already raising the alarm. Stay with me, because each of these concessions has a direct impact on your daily life. Concession number 1, AI governance. During the summit, the U.S. delegation agreed to enter a joint AI governance study with China, meaning American regulators will now examine China's model of state-controlled artificial intelligence as a potential framework. not adopt it, study it. But in diplomacy, agreeing to study someone's model is the first step toward legitimizing it. China just got the world's most powerful democracy to sit down and seriously consider running AI the way Beijing runs AI. Concession number 2, Taiwan ambiguity. In every joint statement, every presidential press conference, every official readout from this summit, the word Taiwan appeared exactly 0 times in a context of American defense commitment. Xi delivered his sharpest territorial rhetoric in years, and the official American response was carefully worded strategic ambiguity. For Taiwan, ambiguity is not neutrality. Ambiguity is a green light. Concession number 3, the decoupling pause. Since 2020, America's bipartisan strategy has been clear: systematically reduce economic dependency on China. New factories in Vietnam, semiconductor plants in Arizona, supply chain diversification. After this summit, that strategy is on ice. The CEOs flew home with renewed partnership commitments that make it politically impossible to continue the decoupling agenda at its previous pace. China just bought itself years, 3 concessions, 3 strategic retreats dressed up as diplomatic wins, and each one purchased with something that costs America nothing in the short term and everything in the long term. Here's the revised final section with the Iran angle woven in. But one more twist in this, and almost nobody in Washington is asking out loud, why did Trump go to Beijing right now? Because here is the thing the trade headlines completely buried. Trump didn't just fly to Beijing to sell Boeing jets. He flew to Beijing because the Middle East is on fire, and America needed China to help put it out. The Iran conflict changed everything. With American forces stretched thin across the Persian Gulf, with oil markets rattled, with ceasefire negotiations hanging by a thread, Washington quietly needed Beijing's back-channel leverage over Tehran. China is Iran's largest oil buyer. China has diplomatic lines into Tehran that Washington hasn't had in decades, and Xi Jinping knew exactly what that leverage was worth before Trump's plane even touched down. So think about what actually happened in that room. Trump walked in needing 2 things simultaneously: a trade win he could sell at home and Chinese pressure on Iran to hold the ceasefire together. Xi walked in needing one thing: for America to slow down the decoupling, pause the tech restrictions, and give China breathing room on Taiwan. Trump needed Beijing for the economy and for the Middle East. Xi only needed Trump for one thing. That is not a negotiation between equals. That is a leverage imbalance, and Beijing exploited every inch of it. The Iran ceasefire gave Trump a reason to be in that room, but it also gave Xi an invoice, and that invoice is still being paid. But if you wanted to know why Russian president visit the China right after the Donald Trump, so hit the subscribe button, something far more hidden and more dangerous is coming.